Tēnā tātou e te whare, nei anō te mihi o Aoraki Mauka, ka rere ngā pātū wata o ngā tupuna, ke taurawa iho ki o koutou maunga whakahi, ngā tihi whakatauki, ngā whare katoa o koutou tupuna, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, huri tai awhio i ngā mautere Erua, tēnā tātou katoa. Nā reira, ko aue tuake nei, ko Eruera Tarena, mai ngā iwi o Ngaitahu, Ngāti Prau, te whānau Apanui, ngā hapu o Ngaitua Huriri, Ngāti Ira Kehu, Ngāti Huirapa, me aku hononga ki oku whanaunga ki ora ka aparima, awarua, ko tūhono mai, tēnā tātou. I runga noi te whakaro ko tō tātou kaupapa ko whakaingotia ko Hūtia Te Punga, ka tīmata ria tō tātou kaupapa ki tētahi karakia, no kaitahu, hanga i ana ki te wairea, ki te whakariti i tō tātou waka mō tana haerenga, nā reira he mea iahu mai i te hekenga o ngā tūpuna. Hoi anō, hei whakatimatanga, hei tīmata ria tō tātou hui. Torona taku ringa kia kāpaki tua e tū nei. Torona i runga, torona i raro, amo ake au ko kāpaki tua e tū nei. Haia te awa, wāhia te awa, puta i tua, puta i waho, puta i mua i te paki ako te rākau e tū nei. O maere nuku, o maere raki, o maere i te māra whenua o te whenua, tauri kura e tākoto nei. I ruka tāne, i raro tāne, paku tāne, rākihi tāne, no haka no te āriki o te whenua tauri kura e horā nei. Whanno, tū mai te toki ko kāpaki tua, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. So kia ora tātou, my name's Eruera Tarena. It's just a real pleasure to welcome everyone coming straight from the hallway in my house. Luckily with no tamariki to disturb us this morning. Just to welcome everyone and to join us to share some of the findings and some of the kōrero, ngā hina tore, ngā māramatanga I puta of our rangahau looking at culturally responsive professional learning and development and vocational settings. A bit of a mouthful there, but Hūtia Te Punga, kia rewaina tō tātou waka. So how do we launch our waka forward into the future in terms of positive Māori futures? So first and foremost, ka nui aku mihi kia koe Helen, Joe, koutou ko tō tira, ko koutou no tērā ngā huru I tai ai e tēnā manu te rere. So just to acknowledge, support our partners in this kaupapa, Ako Aotearoa. And I also want to acknowledge our whanaunga Melanie Tainui and Sharon Armstrong, who were both really pivotal in the research and in this kaupapa, but who are no longer part of our team, have moved on to other mahis. Ka rere nei ngā mihi kia rātou, they were the ones that did most of the work. So he tika kia mihi e tātou. Probably just some brief kind of housekeeping in terms of this hui. Is that we're going to try and keep it pretty brief at our end. So we've produced a report, which you can there we go, there it is. You can download from our website and from Ako Aotearoa, and we'll be posting a link in the chat box. But really, we're going to try and create as much space as possible to just have some more free-flowing conversation and question time. So as we go through the hui, if you do have any pātai, feel free to dump them in the chat box, which is down the middle bottom of your Zoom browser. And we'll have someone that's scanning those questions and we'll be preparing them for afterwards. So we're going to aim for roughly around 20 minutes of kōrero and sharing some of the insights of the research. And then 20 minutes, ki te whakawhiti whakaro, ki te wānanga, so 20 minutes of just open sort of discussion time. And probably just a bit of context about our kaupapa. Well, really, we've been sort of tracking, I had a focus on vocational education for a while. And when you look at that in terms of our rangatahi population, we can see that, well, we've got a younger, faster growing age structure within Te iwi Māori. And so we know that rangatahi are really going to be the backbone of Aotearoa's future prosperity. And even the fact that between 2013 and 2018, our Māori workforce grew by 50%. So that's something that's emerging from our latest census findings. So yeah, we've got a huge opportunity there, but we also have some significant inequities. And I was sort of scanning the newspaper today and saw something about the gender pay gap. even for our Māori men at peak earnings, that pay gap for Māori men is around about 25% less than everyone else. So when you look at it, we still have significant inequities in terms of Māori engagement in tertiary, the level of engagement, the qualification attainment, and all of those inequalities in education lead to inequalities in economic outcomes as well. So Hūtia Te Punga was really sort of focused around culturally responsive learning and development in vocational settings, and really looking at 3 separate cases, one within the Polytech sector in terms of Otago Polytechnic, an ITO with BCITO, and then of course Telford in terms of a PTE. Now, obviously when you start out on a 2-year journey, there are a few things that happen, and so we had a few shifts there with Telford. As you're aware of, we had this little thing called the review of vocational education that came along. And just to top things off at the end there, we've had COVID-19. And so really, when we've been looking at this, our interest in this space, it's probably been because of its potential in terms of social impact, in terms of whānau transformation. For a lot of our whānau, once you gain your level 3 NCA credits, gain entry into university, most of those indicators suggest that you're already on a pretty good path. And so for us, our interest in vocational has been that potential around whānau transformation and around supporting those shifts in practice, those transformational outcomes about raising Māori horizons and lifting Māori incomes and tackling poverty and inequality at their root causes. So that's been where we've been sort of focused, and of course, review of vocational education, and in particular, COVID-19 has put all of that in the spotlight, where we're now fully aware of the impacts of the coming recession, and in particular, how those impacts are going to be concentrated and by Māori who are overrepresented in lower skill, undervalued and underpaid work. And so really looking at vocational education as a key systemic lever of change into how we can support Māori transformation and really raising those, the horizons of possibility. So ka nui e rā kōrero I konei, ka whakawhāriki here te kaupapa. And in terms of, sorry, Siri's interrupting me at my end. In terms of our kaupapa, we're going to hand over to 2 of our kai kōrero who are partners in terms of the research. And so ko te tuatahi mihi atu kia koe Janine Kapa, hi kakakatoa e te tuku I te raka kōrero tō tātou māngai ngaitahu, me noho ana ki Arai Te Uru. And so our first speaker is Janine Kapa from Otago Polytechnic, and then should be followed by Vai Punivai, tō tātou whanaunga no ngā mautere o Tonga, no te BCITO. So ka rere nei a mihi kia korua, tuku te raka kōrero kia koe Janine. Tēnā koe e hoa.
Tēnā koe, Eru, te kaihautu o tō tātanau waka o te wānei. Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou hoki e ka rauraka te rama. He uri au no te kite o rā kaihautu, ko kaitahu ka te mamu I waitaha o ku iwi, ko Kātira Kehu ka te mako o kunei hapu. Nei rā te mihi ko atu, kia koutou e rauraka te rama huri noa I te motu nei. Ko Janine Kapa tēnei, ko te kai tohu ki te kurumata tūne ki Otago, ai ki te takiwa o Arai Te Uru. Ko Arai Te Uru te tai, ko Arai Te Uru te waka, ko Arai Te Uru te whenua e noho ana mātou I tēnei wā. So tēnā tātou. Kia ora Eru, tēnā koe, thank you for your introduction and obviously the broad overview of the mahi rangahau that we've been fortunate to be involved with. I'm just going to touch on a wee few things before I hand that ako back to Eru, and that is really around the relational pedagogical approach we are trying to embed here through Otago Polytechnic. So I'll be speaking to that for just a minute or 2. So as we're all aware, as educationalists around the motu, affecting change in a tertiary environment to advance the aspirations of iwi Māori, and ensure that Māori flourishes Māori, and that's definitely what our tauira are saying. Our kaiako meeting them where they are, as Māori. It requires a highly focused strategic approach that involves the whole of the institution, and it's got to be from grassroots to governance and absolutely everything in between. We are committed to being a responsive treaty partner. We're not there yet, but we're well on the journey. And within that, ensuring that what we do here also meets the educational aspirations of mana whenua. Now for us, we have a formalised, enduring partnership, treaty-based partnership with our papatipu runaka, but we also have a very strong and enduring relationship at an iwi level. So we cover the whole motu almost in that regard. But these relationships and the collegiality, the partnerships that we have with both hapu, iwi, and our rohe, with our stakeholders, industry, that joined up approach that we have means that we are well connected and in tune with the very people that we are here to serve, essentially. And so for the last 15 years, we have been strategically integrating Māori development at Otago Polytechnic in a holistic and coordinated way, premised in this treaty-based partnership. Our roadmap, our beacon for change, is our Māori strategic framework, which I think all of us have something of its type, which it articulates the educational aspirations of each partner, actually. And we have really strong reporting and accountability mechanisms tied into that. So I believe we're one of the only, possibly one of the few, but possibly only one of the ITPs in the sector who produces a Māori annual report, and that reports on progress made against all of the priorities within our Māori strategic framework, which our previous council, now our board, will present back to mana whenua on one of our papatipu marae, which we do every year. So that's built into the core of what we do as well. And so when we look at the summary of the findings from Hūtia Te Punga, that relational pedagogical approach to learning and teaching in environments such as ours is absolutely crucial. And the part that we saw being benefited, part of this rupu, this research team, was around a co-constructed culturally responsive PD that we develop for staff, because it starts with actually our kaimahi in terms of their capabilities, their cultural capacity, and the 101 for all, whilst we have our experts on call. So that's quite pivotal to all of this, and that definitely came out in the research, obviously, as you'll see in both the summary document and the full report once you get a chance to have a full read of that. So I think that's what I'm going to touch on for now. I'm going to come back, obviously, and talk about what does all of this mean with regards to the environment we now find ourselves in post-COVID. Many challenges, but within that, of course, there's lots of opportunities for our people as well. So kia koe te mana anō, Eru, koina.
Tēnā koe, Janine. And I suppose coming back to the kaupapa, that really what we were trying to identify are those levers of systemic change within vocational education settings. And we all know, I'm sure we've all worked within enough institutions to know that everyone loves restructuring and shifting the deck chairs around, but when you kind of come out the end of that, often everything's pretty much the same. And so what we've been trying to identify are what are those levers that are beyond just purely structural changes. And I think what Janine was referring to really was just even those relationship dynamics with hapu, with iwi, and the role they play as part of that, as a lever of change in terms of transformation and delivering better outcomes for whānau. And so within ka huri nei te aro i nānei, ko tātou whanaunga Vai, tēnā koe hoa, and really to talk about one of the things that made this project different was really taking a lot of those that culturally responsive professional learning and development that has been deployed within universities and extending that into both ITP and into new settings, and in particular the ITOs. And so just really pleasure to have worked with Vai, and tuku te rākau kōrero kia koe hoa. Tēnā koe Vai.
Kia ora everyone. Probably have to apologise first. My te reo is not that great, and my Tongan is worse. So I'll just stick to the universal English for now. Hopefully you can all understand me. I work for the BCITO as the strategy manager. If you draw a line south of Taupo all the way to Southland, that's my region, and I'm based here in Christchurch. So all the way from a small island called Tonga into a big island called South Island, and I live here close to Eru and the whānau here in Canterbury. Probably, if I could comment on the benefits of being involved in this research and the project was, for those of you that don't know, but the BCITO is actually quite strong on pedagogy, and we have actually quite a principled way of driving learning for our industries and our learners and our apprentices, and therefore, if one of our principles is around acknowledging that every learner that comes in and enrolls with the BCITO is actually unique, and the environment they're in is unique, and that applies to anybody, age, gender, ethnicity, etc. And one of the things that we found from this research was, whilst we did have some principles, but we didn't go deep enough to understand what it meant. And out of the work that we did here with Portia and the team was that when we looked at our Maori apprentices in Canterbury, is that their preference and their style for learning was different, and that we had to understand that they needed to come into a group format, and they needed to understand each other first before the actual learning happens and occurs. It was more effective to learn as a collective as opposed to those that learn best being alone. So we trialled that here in Canterbury, and we're still running dedicated support tutorials for ethnic groups. So we're separating, even within the Pacifica groups, we try to separate the Samoans from the Tongans. That's probably because they have a race to the sausage rolls first, and then there might be a conflict there. But the learning outcomes, we find that the confidence actually rises in the room once the cohorts work out who they are, and they can actually have confidence in asking questions. Because we found that if we mix them into a group, then you're always going to get the extroverts being at the front of the class, taking up the attention of the tutor. So in this method, it was really very beneficial, and that's why we've continued with that method, is to group them and segment them. And in the end, it's not about who can understand the resources and the learning best. It's about getting everybody to the finish line. And our principles don't discriminate as an organisation. We don't discriminate whether your starting point is 10 metres ahead of anyone else, as long as everybody gets to the end. And that's where we see success. We also found out that each individual drivers and motivation of our Maori apprentices were very similar and quite separate from others. And that just enforces our need to go this way. And the research actually pointed us strongly down that way. And I'm quite excited that Greg Dirk is online today, because we, having this report launched today is the first step of moving on with these findings. So I plan to talk to Greg separately, but it's good he's online so he can hear me. And we will be, taking some of this learnings, because it's effective and it's unique, and recognising Māori as an absolute priority, as to the reasons Eru was talking about, and balancing out that outcome that non-Māori achievement is always higher than Māori, and that, instead of, that's kind of universal, everybody knows that, but what do we do? That's always the big question. And I believe this is this is where the rubber meets the road, is that we start to separate the best learning environments, the best preference for learning on the ground, and that will probably inform the higher level strategy. Yeah, and I think the next step for us is that whilst we can group them where we can, but there's a bigger player in this, and that's called industry. and industry don't necessarily understand the gap that we have just found. So our next part is to try and lead industry with this sort of understanding, because there is a level of fear inside this, in the psyche. So it's everybody looks for the easiest one size fits all. Well, this is not a one size fits all. We have to recognize everybody's different, and everybody's learning style is different. So our next step for this is actually, yes, we have got it in place for us, but it's now how do we lead our industries with that level of understanding. Yeah, I guess that's that for now. I'll pass back to Eru.
Tēnā koe Vai. Just reminding that we are going to sort of move into question time now. So if you do have any pātai, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. And just want to kind of acknowledge that in terms of apprenticeship pathways, and great that we've got some investment in the last budget in terms of Māori apprenticeships. But when you look at the outcomes, when a Māori apprentice completes their apprenticeship, they basically achieve the same kind of lifetime economic outcomes as if they'd attained a degree. So it's a significant lever of change. The challenge for us is that 6 out of every 13 Māori apprentices completes. And so it is an incredible significant lever of change in terms of economic outcomes, in terms of Māori achievement. But really what Vai has been talking about in the broader kaupapa is to go, well, how do we look beyond sort of structural reforms, such as review of vocational education, to thinking about what are some of the systemic, the cultural, the mindset, the value shifts that we need to create within these learning and work environments to create the conditions for Māori to be successful as Māori. And so really, mihi ka koe Vai, and moving towards first question. I'm going to save some of the tricky ones for Vai coming up, but kia koe Janine, and really looking at what could the tertiary sector be doing now to prepare for the new environment, the post-COVID context. So kia koe te raka kōrero iho.
Kia rehua. I think that's probably a pātai, not just a question that we all have, or the opportunity we all want to leverage off. I know there's been a lot of hui, kōrero, meetings, planning sessions, etc., with various parts of our sector, with industry, with iwi, at a hapu level, at a city level. And so I imagine, I'm really keen to hear what suggestions others have as well. But from our perspective, it's about how we leverage off the existing systems and existing resource to develop a coordinated and joined up response. There's lots happening in this space. We need to look at the areas of need in terms of industry. We know that we need to recognise that many of our people, and I know Eru's presented that quite a startling statistic to us, and that is that previously, and that is that 60% of our people and 75% of rangatahi Māori are going to be negatively impacted by COVID. And we're talking post-COVID. We know that the fallout is really yet to hit us, and it's happening already. So how do we respond to that? There's lots of different moving parts to this. We do need to recognise, obviously, that many of our people have vast experience and expertise and skills and capabilities from many years working. But then we have rangatahi as well, who are being thrust into a world of much more uncertainty than already existed. So we've talked about this sort of need to assess really where they're at, especially our experienced pakeke who are now newly unemployed. What are the opportunities for retraining or rapid reskilling, upskilling? Many don't have the luxury to pivot and retrain in areas of, for example, to take time out for a 2-year diploma or a 3-year degree. So we do see a role for micro-credentialing. Absolutely, in terms of filling those gaps. We're working quite hard at this local level with all the different moving parts here in Ōtepoti, and obviously with mana whenua leadership, to look at how we identify these people, work with them in terms of pathway planning, career coaching, assessing that prior learning, assessing the prior knowledge and the quals that they already have, and looking at where some of the gaps might be. And you rapid upskilling with or reskilling with micro-credentials, with training schemes, utilising the relationships we already have with industry and other stakeholders to join the dots. So there's a lot in train at the moment in terms of how we connect all the different moving parts up. It is an opportunity, but we need to make sure we do it in a really joined up and coordinated way.
Kia ora, Janine. And I think there's so much talk around shovel-ready projects. We kind of need rangatahi-ready infrastructure. And to think about, well, how do we support industry? How do we support vocational education settings to be ready for a younger Browning workforce? And what are the changes that need to be made? And again, Hūtia Te Punga hasn't looked at structural reform, it's looked at cultural reform. What are the changes in values and mindsets and orientations so that we don't see our young brown talent as labourers, but as leaders, and meeting them where they are and supporting them to where they want to be. And so, ngā mihi, kia koe, Janine. I've saved up a really tricky question for you, Vai. And in what way could the apprenticeship pathway be more effective and responsive to learner needs?
Yeah, I want to know who asked that question.
It was Greg Durkin.
No, I think that's a great question, and I think the last two words on that question is probably the emphasis here is the learner needs. You know, because this is not about institutions and policies. In the end, we're here for the young Kiwi that wants to have a path out a career in their life and starting out in their own creation of their own finance. So I think that's an important part that we can't leave out of that question, and I'll try and keep my answer to that. I can probably speak, given that I've like Greg, I've worked in the engineering ITO, and now I'm in construction ITO, so I can probably balance out my response to this question. And I actually think to do that from a strategic point of view, there needs to be a balance between the EPI, which is what ITOs and ITPs are funded on, and key measures, versus good pedagogy or principles, because funding drives and demands transactional outcomes, where pedagogy actually embraces the learning environment and understands each learner in their own unique circumstances. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's an art for each institution to balance, because otherwise you could be if you rely on the EPIs alone, you're gonna trapped and falling into the one size fits all, because it's the easiest way to do things. Whereas if you balance up EPIs and principle approach and good pedagogy, you will appreciate that every work site in construction is unique. Every learner is unique. It acknowledges that starting point for each learner is different. They start where they start, and that doesn't matter. What matters is that they get to the end, and we're there to hold their hand right through that journey, regardless. And I actually think that's the balance that's required for each institution. If we want to be effective, you can't treat this as a one size fits all. It doesn't fit. So, and particularly for Māori apprentices and learners, they are priority here. I don't think we should kid around that. It's absolute priority. And the next part to that, as I mentioned earlier, is if we get that understanding, we can get that balance, we can have our structural responses to that. Then we need to lead other stakeholders, not just TSD and NZQA. We need to lead industry along the way here, because they have, in vocational education, we rely on employers to be our tutors or trainers, to a commercial time frame and standards, and they need to have that sort of understanding, because they sit with their own set of fears about how do we deal with pedagogy, backgrounds, preference for learning, style of learning, literacy and numeracy, all those issues needs to be simplified, and it starts with us, and then we need to pass that on. Great question though.
Yeah, just ask Vai to stop submitting questions to himself. But tēnā koe Vai, I think you've raised a really key part, and when you read the research findings, you could sort of see that there is no one sort of silver bullet, but there are kind of layers of change, and there are layers, levers at different parts of the system. So that you've talked about, you know, there are some that are structural levers and there are some that are cultural levers. And so it's that mix of, you know, how do we tweak funding flows to ensure that, you know, equitable outcomes are resourced equitably. We're not expecting more and funding less, but also that it needs to be complemented by pedagogical shifts in practice as well. And so I think there, when you're looking at that, we have to acknowledge that there are both structural flaws and cultural flaws in our system that have delivered inequitable outcomes for Māori, and we need structural solutions and cultural solutions to address those flaws. And that's really what both Rove and COVID present, is the opportunity for transformation. And so I've cherry-picked the best question, which is directed at myself. What direction would you like to see things go in relation to Rove? And I'd probably start actually by looking at the broader context of COVID and saying if we look, probably one of the biggest indicators of how things are going to roll out for us as Māori is the 2008 global financial crisis, where Māori being disproportionately represented in what is often classed as low-skilled or undervalued, underpaid work, meant that Māori bore the brunt of those economic harms, as we did in Rogernomics when all of our uncles and aunties lost their jobs. But also too, that it wasn't just that Māori lost our jobs, is that it took longer for our people to regain employment and took longer for our people to return to their previous income levels. And so that long tail of those impacts of recession have historically always impacted Māori harder. And as Janine pointed out, that's in many ways the position that we're in at the moment. What we can expect, that it took 10 years for Māoridom to recover and return to where we were before the 2008 GFC. So we definitely don't want to be in recovery mode in 15, 20 years' time, because this crisis is much worse than the GFC. I think we've got to look at vocational education and recognise that some of those harms have been created by previous government policies around vocational training, and in particular channeling more Māori into areas where we are overrepresented in boom-bust sectors. And so rather than thinking about a deliberate strategy of our Māori as the blue-collar labour fodder workforce for Aotearoa, how do we bring better balance to that and look at the breadth of vocational training, which includes a diversity of options into not just shovel-ready careers, but future-ready careers as well. And so when you look at that, we've all been involved in apprenticeship training trusts and Māori trades training, which can have fantastic outcomes. But we have to also reflect that we need a diversity, me ara rau, that we can't just have one strategy, and we need to be thinking about opportunities to align Māori pathways to future-focused areas that are vocational, but in health, in education, in STEM, in ICT, and in tech, so that our rangatahi are not just shovel-ready, but are also future-ready and are able to transition into those future opportunities. When we come to Rove, really, Rove, in my view, is a structural process of structural reform. It's not yet addressing what Vai and Janine have been talking about in terms of other layers of change. In terms of te tiriti and treaty partnership, in terms of relationship dynamics and shifting those dynamics of power with hapu, with runanga, with iwi, and in many ways the mindsets and culture of the institution. And so really that's the opportunity, is how do we move beyond structural reform to also look at cultural transformation, to go how do we get that shift in pedagogy, that shift in values, So the rangatahi are seen as the leaders that they are, and that we can be creating the conditions to meet them where they are and support them to where they want to be to achieve their own, determining their own futures and determining their own career pathways towards their dream jobs. We've probably got a couple questions left, so I'm just going to pose one to Janine to comment first. What is the role of iwi, hapu and runanga in tertiary education?
Oh, it's one word really, it's pivotal. I think we all know that relationships are key to everything that we do. And of course, it's place-based, it's where we are, it's where our tauira are. I see some pātai down the side here. Karina, in terms of, what role Te Taumata Aoronoi play in the new NZS structure, it has to be, it's a crucial role, and I'm heartened by the fact that we have representation, well, that Eru is part of that, and others who are absolute rangatira and leaders in their own right as well. So it's about how that filters down and how we actually influence at every level to achieve the traction we need. I know we can do that at a local level, and I've said right from the outset, I wouldn't want to be in my leadership role here at OP without my people with me. They are me, I am them, and we have an absolute duty to ensure that the educational aspirations of our people of mana whenua are absolutely embedded into what we do and how we do it. We have representation, obviously, on our board. I'm a bit jelly of our Te Arawa whanauka who have, I think, about 70% representation on their board, so that's pretty awesome. We have 2 of the 7 on our board are mana whenua, which is a great start for down here. We have a subcommittee to our board as well, who are integral into everything we do. The way we greet all our tauira, all our first year learners, first time learners in our front door with mihi whakatau, with a pohere for all our tauira Māori the following day, and one of our papa te pumarai right throughout the journey, and when they finish with us through Māori pre-graduation and such as well. So yeah, our people are part of the fabric of who we are, and we are the fabric of this community, and that ability to maintain that, to continue to strengthen that enduring relationship mai rano within the new system is absolutely central to what we do.
Kia ora, Janine. And again, the research does present some sort of potama frameworks that kind of peel back those layers of change. So right from the strategic direction and strategic frameworks in terms of Māori success, relationships with ahika, right through to culturally responsive PLD, and right down into pedagogy, practice, delivery. And so there's no simple one sort of silver bullet, but really what the research presents is kind of a layering of tactics that can be deployed at various levels of an institution in terms of those vocational education settings. But another question here for Vai, which is really keen to hear about your thoughts on how to bring industry along with us. So often I hear employers say, we treat everyone the same. What do you think? What do people think can happen in Rove to keep this on top across the newly created organisations in terms of TITOs, WDCs and RSLGs?
Yeah, there's 10 questions in that, isn't there? I'll try and answer one. First of all, if I can just say, when I say leading industry, we're probably as a BCITO was set up quite well in terms of our connections at various levels. So we, right from the minister's office to the small size company, father and son builder on in Gore. So we're actually quite set up in that. I mean, we're in front of customers every minute of every day, of every week. So in terms of accessing industry, it's quite accessible for us. To win hearts and minds, obviously we will have a strategic intent around how do we deal with the big players first, the most influential. So we'll separate our communications separately for that, because the pains are different at different levels. So you have your big corporates who have got resource no problems with resources, to your single man bands in central Otago or in Tapuae. So our approach to them has to be kind of communicated in a segmented way. I think that I've answered the question.
Kia ora, Vai, you were right. There were about 10 questions there, and we've pretty much got chance for one. So I'm going to slice two together. And one is, what are the key accelerators to achieve scale across Aotearoa with respect to this kaupapa? I suppose too, just offering some thoughts to go that our previous responses, when you think of Rogernomics or even the global financial crisis, really just had little minor improvements. So they weren't transformational. And so the risk is that we repeat those historic patterns where we don't look at really addressing some of those structural and systemic flaws within our tertiary education system in terms of that journey. So the opportunity, and again, kind of making that point that you can't use structural changes to fix deficit thinking. And so really, what are the cultural and structural changes we can make in terms of transforming vocational education settings so that they are supporting Māori equitable outcomes? So really not a three-step plan in terms of a solution, but looking at that to go, the first thing we probably need to do is to be making a commitment towards using the COVID-19 recovery and using vocational education to create the platform for an equitable and utility-based recovery, where how we approach vocational education, if we do more of the same, then we could expect more of the same results, where even if we achieve some improvements and some short-term outcomes, if we're not investing in Māori success and progression into higher levels of training, then we can expect further harms for our people and future economic shocks caused by automation, future of work, and climate change. Whereas if we take a transformational approach and we are focused on supporting Māori progression and higher incomes, then we can see a decrease in inequality and bring that future of an equitable future closer towards us. And just that last point, how much of a key lever is te tiriti or waitangi? And obviously in the research, it touches on a whole bunch of different layers, but ultimately the first part is that values base. They go, who are we as a people? What do we value? And if every rangatahi was our own child, how would we want them to be treated in their experiences in terms of vocational education and their journey through into employment? And I think that Te Tiriti partnership creates the cultural basis, the cultural paradigm in terms of how we can work together to transform outcomes for our people. And again, probably that summary part to go, as much as we talk about shovel ready, we've got to think about how do we support our rangatahi, our growing rangatahi population to be future ready, and how do we support ourselves as institutions, as agencies, as iwi, to be focused on being rangatahi ready and supporting that generation to become the leaders we know they are. Nā reira, ka ti au I konei, ka nui te pahupahu. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Engari, ka rere nei mihi te tuatahi ki Ako Aotearoa. Koutou katoa I whakatui tō tātou huihuinga. Ki ngā kai kōrero, just to thank Janine and Vai for their lovely words and insights into the research. To acknowledge our research team, Portia London, Vai Punivai, Melanie Tainui and Sharon Armstrong, and encourage everyone to download the report and get into the depths of it. And ka rere hoki nei a mihi kia koutou katoa I whakawātia koutou ki te whakawhiti whakaro I tēnei ahia. So just all the best. Hei whakakapi I tātou kōrero, mīnoi tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te mahi o te hua mā kihiki, kia toi te kupu, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tīnā, tīnā, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Mauri ora.